Hello, everybody. This is Santiago Zapata, also known as Lashy, and I am doing this interview for Temple of the Roguelike. Today, we are here with Anders, the developer of SKALD against the Dark Priory. This is an upcoming retro-style RPG, computer RPG, uh, with a lot of polish and I believe lots of affordances for modern players. I have played the demo and I have really enjoyed it. There's a lot of potential on this game. Um, there's a demo available, but in just 3 days, we are going to see the release of this game on the market. So I want to welcome Anders to this interview. Hello, Anders. How are you doing today?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing good. I'm a little bit stressed, a little bit tired, so it's good to kind of take a little bit of break from launch logistics and come hang out with you guys. It's actually a little bit of a break. So, but things are going good, honestly. I think if you are not being stressed before launch, you're doing something wrong. So I think it's natural to be a little bit stressed. But all in all, things are actually going quite well, and the game is looking really good. But then in testing today, we found two sort of conditional blockers that really had to immediately be fixed. So this is typical. 3 days before launch, we find them. But I mean, better we find them now than if we find them in 3 days. So yeah.
All right. Thank you for accepting this interview, Anders. And today we are also joined by Esteban Martinez.
Hello.
He's a narrative designer from Slashware. He actually designed the interview or the questions. We will be running that interview, but also maybe we will have some additional questions that may go along the way. You may have seen the gameplay that he did on Friday of this game, where he went through the first part of the game. And I think we can start with the questions. I actually took a look at the demo as well, and I think I will start with just praising that first part of the demo. And I guess it's even better in the finished game that will be released. A great way to introduce all the different aspects of the game, and I mean the way you start the game, and we're going to see a little bit of that in a bit. You start the game in a scenario where you're trapped in a ship and you have to escape, and there's a situation going on there, and you are slowly introduced to the different subsystems of the game, like well, how the equipment is managed and all that, but also how the different attributes of your player affect a lot of different actions. And I believe it's great how that is slowly revealed to the player. And I wanted to ask you, Anders, how was the development of that part? Was that like designed from the start, or how did you end up with that?
It's actually a very good question, and it's fun that you point it out because it is very sort of almost over designed the beginning. I really tried to do like a Super Mario Bros. Thing where the player is tricked into doing the correct things and to interacting with the different subsystems. So, for instance, this is no spoiler, but the first room you start in, you're locked in a room, and the only way to open the door is to find the dagger and equip the dagger and then use the dagger to pick the lock, which is sort of a way to kind of like uh, make the player both feel a little bit clever, but also force them to kind of learn some of the very basic systems in the game. And so there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of like um, something I enjoy doing when I have time to do it. It's like I always try to think about both like the progression of movement and then what will capture the player's eyes. So when you wake up, for instance, one of the first things you see is the chest that is a chest that has the dagger in it. So hopefully most players will see it and then they will start walking towards it. They have to walk around some boxes, and then as they're walking around the boxes, they see a door instead, and then maybe they try to open the door but the door is locked, and so then you have a problem, and then you remember that there is a chest and you go to the chest, and so back and forth. So there's a lot of that going on, and it's very sort of it is very intentional in the way it is designed, that beginning of the game and those sort of first minutes of the game. And Yeah, so it's fun that you noticed it because it is you are absolutely correct.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges in these kind of games because as a developer, you design a lot of complex interactions. You want to make the game feel alive, but then there's a barrier for players to understand and to exploit all these systems that you design. So I believe it's a great way to unfold stuff. And also, I also liked that there's like branching paths, right? Even for these tutorials, so you get to a point where you have to decide what door to use, and depending on that, well, it's either you explore the stealth mechanism or you explore the combat directly. Well, I ended up exploring combat as well because my stealth was so bad. In the character that I ended up using, he was just a master, I believe is the name of the class or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
Um, yeah, because I just wanted to start experiencing the game, and it's always easier to just go with a warrior. So that's what I
exactly,
ended up doing. Yeah.
exactly.
Um, so
I think
okay.
yeah, I think because I think like one of the things also to show early in the game is that choices have consequences, and it's not because it is important to kind of punish players for making bad choices. But the thing is that I want to kind of teach the player that this is a game where you should think about what you do. You should do the things you do intentionally. You shouldn't just be doing stuff in the game because the game I can say right away that on most of the difficulties the game gets not necessarily hard, but it's certainly a game that demands your attention. You can't play it with your left hand and just kind of like you. We have adjustable difficulties. You can play on very low difficulty if you really just want to experience the story. But I would say that the optimal way to engage with the game is to kind of let the game be a little bit difficult and kind of try to understand the world and try to survive in the world because it doesn't come for free.
That's right. I want to give the word to Stevan because I know I am so excited about this game that I believe I can just talk the entire hour that we have started. Uh, Stevan, do you have any thoughts about your gameplay on Friday? About this time that you had with the game?
I want to praise the writing because the pacing has been designed in a great way. Uh, the fact that, for example, the rat, I really want to praise that first encounter with the rat because it starts with a description of the rat that doesn't allow you to understand why is this important, why is this
Yeah.
really horrendous until the character also understands it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. I think one of the things that is important for me in my writing is, all of these things are things I try to think about. I'm not always successful in doing it because making a game is difficult. But one of the things I always try to do is to kind of don't feel that I have to over explain everything to the player. I think like a game like this works better when you don't really give them as much information. It is enough to kind of explain something and have you understand that this is strange to the player as well. Because like a rat is always the typical first enemy of a role-playing game, but even making that kind of feel a little bit like mysterious, like what's going on here. This is obviously new to the character as well as me as the player. It's not like go down in the basement and kill these rats under the tavern and then you will get some gold. Like there is some. So thank you for that. It's been challenging to to write the game in that way, but I think it's paying off to be honest. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I also wanted to talk about that difficulty system because I thought that was pretty noble, and also like intertwined with that question, maybe something with the relationship that you have had with Raw Fury. I was wondering if you, from the start, wanted to have like a very hardcore game without those kind of affordances for players for a narrative mode, or did that come as an afterthought where you wanted to expand the market or the amount of people that you wanted to be able to experience the game?
No, actually, I would say that all of the like the idea of having customizable difficulty and stuff like that in the game was always part of my sort of design pillar, because accessibility is very important for me. So for me, when we talk about difficulty, we are actually talking about accessibility and kind of being cognizant that there are a lot of players who are not necessarily, they might not even have time to play the game on the difficulty that I want them to experience the game on. And so since the game is so systems heavy, it is also quite easy to make those systems adjustable through the difficulty. And so that's always been a big priority, and I think like it's one of the things that pay off, because I think anyone can enjoy the game from their own terms. That being said, there is also like, it's also interesting to see, because we have obviously myself, and we also have some QA testers who are working with us through Raw Fury, and we're all kind of like, we all agree that the game is most like the highest difficulty is definitely the most fun. So it's a little bit like, I wish more people would take the time to try to learn to play the game on a higher difficulty. Like playing the game on an easy difficulty is not the intended experience, but I respect that for some people it is the way that they are going to experience the game. That's completely fine.
That's great. Cool. Yeah, I think we actually had some questions planned, but I believe we ended up discussing some interesting topics. But yeah, I think we can, yeah, we can start. Maybe you can start with question number 7, Stefan. I just sent you a message there.
Number 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the game clearly has been influenced by old classics.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the Ultima series. But talking other than video games, what's the DNA of SKALD?
I think from like a games perspective, other than video games, there is obviously a lot of tabletop role-playing games in the game. It is very sort of clearly trying to emulate the experience of playing a tabletop role-playing game, both in sort of the way that you actually roll the dice and stuff like that in the game. I think that is very, very important for the game. And from like a literary perspective, there is a lot of influence from like fantastic fiction and sort of Lovecraftian fiction, like the whole sort of literary genre of both authors like H.P. Lovecraft and Robert W. Chambers, but also Robert Howard made Conan, you know, like that sort of sword and sorcery mixed with kind of like cosmic horror that influences my writing very, very strongly, I would say. Grim dark fantasy also, obviously, but like that kind of like hard-boiled, not so, it's very human-centric. There's not really fantasy races, sort of non-Tolkien fantasy. If the game was going to sort of be adapted for like a book or a TV show or whatever, it would be in a much more sort of low fantasy or low magic setting than it currently is. You will not really have experienced it so much in the demo, because the magic system was still very rough in the demo, but now in the main game, the magic system is kind of coming to its full form. But there is like an interesting balancing where I would ideally not like so much magic in the game, but magic is very fun from like a player experience. So it's kind of like one of the trade-offs we've had to do. It's I did this same analogy at another interview I did. It's like whenever they make Star Wars fiction, it always has to be possible to play as a Jedi character, even though like in the first Star Wars movie, there was only like 1.5 Jedi left in the universe. But then you expose it to the fandom and everyone wants to be a Jedi, so you have to let them be a Jedi. And it's a little bit of the same thing, where like I would have liked for this all to be like more of a Game of Thrones experience, where it's all just people with bad teeth and rusty swords killing each other. But that doesn't make for us fun of an experience, where it would take even more work. At least it would have to lean even more on the narrative, and then that would be challenging to make. A role-playing game as well, so that means that we have to make some affordances. So, but all in all, yeah, Lovecraftian fiction, turn of the century, like fantastic fiction from that area, not from that period, influences the game quite heavily.
Yeah, it can be felt. Yeah, especially H.P. Lovecraft influences. It's
Yeah.
clearly there. It's painted all over the place.
Yeah, it is. It is, and I would say if you have only played the demo, I would say that you've seen nothing yet. Yeah, there
Yeah,
is a lot of it in the game.
that's
So
actually the question that I had. Maybe a lot of people has experienced the demo. What are the main differences that you would say between the full, besides content? I mean, between the full game and the demo.
what are the big differences?
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, as you say, the content there is the game is quite large now. I mean, people are spending on an average of like 30 to 40 hours running it, so it's actually a pretty substantial game. So obviously, there's a lot of content, but I think like the biggest differences from like a mechanical perspective is that, for instance, we have done a large overhaul of spell casting in the game. That's something that has been greatly improved. Balance. There's a lot of not just spell casting, but also like the balancing of the different classes. And I don't think we're there yet. I think we will still be balancing the classes in the game, like post launch as well. But I think we're closer now, or I am closer now to having an experience that is more fun. And there was a lot of like, not a lot of, but I had some sort of what's it called, like some mechanical ambitions for some of the systems in the game that I didn't really manage to put in, and they are not really there, and probably we will have to save them for the sequel instead. But all in all, a much sort of stronger game mechanically. We've also put an incredible, or just since we sent out the press keys, we have a change log that is as long as my arm, with just polish and balancing and balancing and balancing and polishing and balancing and constantly fixing bugs. But it's interesting because it's when you make a game like this, it's very often that you spend so much time programming and implementing stuff that you don't really have time to play. But now for the last week, like this weekend, for instance, I sat down and I ran through the game. And it's so rare that you really do that. You just play the game speed run the game for 15 hours. It's so rare that you do that. And it's sad because it's so helpful, because as a game developer, you get to do all of these micro tweakings, like, oh, this combat encounter it's triggering a little bit too early, or it's, if I just place the monsters a little bit more like this, then it will be better. And that's the kind of like design work where when you're actually building the game from scratch, you tend to do, at least for me, I always think, okay, I'll come back to this later. But then you you very often don't come back to it later. So being able to kind of do all of this like polishing in the end makes a huge difference. And also a lot of sort of quality of life stuff. It's something I'm continuously working on, because I feel, because the game is so low fidelity and a little bit like retro, it's never my intention to make a game that has a poor user experience. I would like to make a game that feels as vintage and as charming as possible, whilst still being as user friendly as possible. So I'm always kind of trying to like see, okay, how can we tweak this, make this a little bit better, make this font a little bit more readable, make this this sound effect a little bit more appealing. Sound effects is another huge thing. In the demo, we only had like very, very primitive 8-bit chirps and like beeps and bops for this. In practice, there wasn't really sound effects in the demo, but now we have a really, really beautiful soundscape in the game. Nothing huge, but like we've added more high fidelity sounds to the game, so the game sounds really, really good, at least in my opinion. That's probably one of like the big game changes. So there's a lot of changes. The game certainly hasn't been frozen since we made the demo, and I'm still writing code. As soon as I hang up this interview, I'm going to continue writing code to make it better. So I think we're probably freezing the build tomorrow, like at the end of my workday today, we are freezing the build, and then probably we will only make another build now before launch if there is some critical bugs we have to fix. So we're pretty late, but we also have. I feel like we have a very good sort of overview. The game is quite good, to be honest, and this is just like polishing. So yeah.
Exciting, yeah, very exciting and very scary to live these last days and hoping that nothing goes wrong launch
Yeah,
day.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Go ahead,
I
Esteban.
I cannot let that slip of the tongue go unanswered. Sequel.
Yeah, I think part of the reason Scald has taken 5 years to make, and part of the reason why it's taken so long to make is that I've had a very strong emphasis on making my own sort of proprietary tool chain, and partially also my own game engine for the game. And the thinking behind it has been that the next game is not going to take 5 years to make. And I really enjoy this genre of game, and I would really like to continue to be able to continue making these kind of like retro style tile based RPGs. I think for me it's a very sort of, it's the same way that some people only make roguelikes. This is kind of like I could make only this style of game. I think at least under optimal circumstances I'm good at it, when things fall the way they should. And like I've learned so much from this game that there is so much we can kind of take into a sequel. So definitely I want to make a sequel, but at the same time, obviously everything comes down to sales numbers and how the finances are doing. And I can't, like, I have a lot of people, like I have a lot of dependents. I'm married and I have children and stuff like that. So I can't continue doing this unless the game sells well. So we will know. We will know in 3 days if there will be a proper sequel or if the sequel will be more of a hobby project. But everything is very strongly positioned for a sequel. If there is even the remotest chance of a business case, then there will, I would say, almost 100% certain be a sequel. It might not be that we like, there might be a scenario where we see that, like, okay, the next game we make is not necessarily Skald 2. Maybe we do, because like there is something about having two games in the same series be very close. That's not always the best business strategy. Um, so maybe we say, let's do something completely different. Let's make a post-apocalyptic fantasy, no, science fiction role-playing game in the Skald engine for the next game, or something like that. Something we can very easily do, but and it would be fun as well from like creative perspective. So I haven't landed exactly what the next project is. I think we just, as I said, we have to look at the numbers, we have to look at the business cases, and kind of talk to for instance, Raw Fury. Are they interested in making a sequel? Like there is a lot of sort of moving pieces, but I intend to do everything I can to continue making another game, or to continue making these games. I really enjoy it, and yeah, I really enjoy it, and I think people enjoy
Amazing.
playing them as well. So
Fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
Yeah,
yeah,
fingers crossed. And I think I have two questions, so I'm going to do them both in a line,
sure.
in a row. So, sorry, Esteban. Um, well, yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk through the years in the Ultima community about like a revival of Ultima series or stuff
Yeah,
like that, and
yeah,
that's so unlikely to happen. But I really wish that projects like Scald get a chance to reboot that, right? And like a new saga um, that keeps some of the values of these original games and then extend it to the future. But
absolutely.
yeah, that's not the question. I just wanted to mention that. All right. So yeah, since this is an interview for Temple of the Roguelike, I also wanted to ask you about the what how does Scald address the question of replayability? Um, of course, this is not a roguelike, right? This is not a
No,
roguelike, that's
no.
clear. Um, but how do you address that? I have already seen a lot of this, and this is kind of a spoiler, I guess, or a hint on that direction. Because the character creation is so deep, right? You can like create so many different types of characters, and I guess each
Yeah,
game each combination, because it's not just the job, you then select a bit, you have like a full a lot of options to customize that character, and they are
yeah.
not cosmetics. But yeah, I was wondering about that. How have you thought about the replayability aspects of the game?
Yeah, this is something we could. I think we could have discussed this for 3 hours. This subject alone, because it's such an interesting question. And just to first of all take it from like a roguelike perspective, there is very little procedurally generated content in the game, but there is some procedural algorithm used in making and placing item drops in the game. And typically for a game like this, a lot of the items magic items would be hand placed. But the problem with that is that it is extremely time consuming. So I basically use that as sort of a way to kind of make things a little bit easier for myself. And so since the game has very sort of powerful tools, it allows me to do stuff like I can design. Everything is sort of very component based. I can design an effect, which is like a fire damage, and then assign all these different properties to it. And then I can say that this effect can be triggered by this spell in this effect pattern, and then that spell can be triggered by this item. So obviously there's nothing new here, but the point is that everything is very modular, and then that allows me to say that, okay, so make all of these different weapons with all of these different spell effects tied to them, and they are magical weapons, and then spread them out through the world. And that's a very sort of nice way of offloading a lot of the manual work that would go into kind of like sitting down and manually creating, okay, so what does a fire sword look like, or what does a sword of ice attack look like, and now this can all be automated. So that's sort of the only kind of procedural content in the game. And then everything else, I would say that the game is being carried by very sort of carefully handcrafted content. And the replayability in the handcrafted content comes from both the fact that there is a lot of at least a lot, but there are certainly different ways of solving very many of the situations. And some of this comes directly from the fact that you can use diplomacy, or you can fight, or you can choose to sneak. But there is also a way where the world map is interconnected in different ways, where you can kind of like I like that maps are not necessarily only linear, that you can take different ways of progressing through them, and then progressing in different ways recontextualizes things. So there is a lot of that going on in the game. And it's important to keep in mind also that this is a game that was made by one person. This is not Baldur's Gate 3. So there is something about the level of expectations in the game. But that is certainly a level of replayability that you can kind of like explore the world on your own terms. And then I would say that a lot of the replayability also comes, as you point out, from like the mechanical perspective. You can create your own class your own character in a very deep way, and you also fully customize all the player characters that join you, the non-player or the non-main characters. You also sort of level them up in the same way as the main character. So you are really kind of in an old school way building a party. And then there's also a thing where a lot of the characters are pre-made and handcrafted, and they have interactions in the game, and then it depends on how do you have both of these characters or just one, and everything like that. But you can also recruit what we call mercenaries, which are completely blank characters if you want to make your own fully homemade party without any sort of pre-made characters. You want to make every character from scratch, and then you can do that. So there's a lot of that, a lot of sort of mechanical replayability in the game, I would say. And since we also have different difficulties, you can play it on super hard difficulty, or you can, yeah. So I think it does a good job. I think obviously it is a very sort of handcrafted experience. So it's not a game that will be played for. Probably not a game you will spend 1,000 hours on, but I think easily you can easily spend at least 40 hours, and I think you could definitely spend 100 hours in the game as well. And yeah, so and then there is like a whole thing where we have a large list of want to do things for the post-launch content. Some of it we will definitely do, and some of it is more dependent on like is can we afford it? Can we like still, does it make sense financially to keep supporting it? We have a lot of things. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but like obviously it's very easy to do stuff like add more classes, add more spells. We can very easily expand a lot of the content areas in the game, make things more like, okay, let's add another way of solving this problem. Let's add another dungeon here. Since the game has a very strong tool set, it's also very easy to expand the game. So that is that is part of it. And then finally, I would also say that I have talked quite a bit previously about wanting to make a public version of the toolset to allow people to mod and create their own content for the game. And that is definitely something that is very near and dear to my heart. I'm going to do everything I can to prioritize getting it done, because I think that is definitely the best way of making this franchise live a long time. It's that you guys can sit down and you can make content with the tool set. But there is something about, even if the tool set would be free, there is something about exposing the software to the public. It needs like it's one thing to make tools that you only use in-house, but it becomes different things once other people are going to use it, because then I will be constantly replying to feature requests and like, so it takes I have to make sure that the level editor doesn't hurt the production of the main game. The main game has to come first, and then once that is done, it will. I think it is something that could potentially make this game very popular for a long time. Is if we released the tool set. Yeah.
Amazing. All right, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's important to consider that kind of stuff nowadays. You cannot just release a game that has fixed content, but you should also um, lean on the community a little bit. And I believe we will also want to talk a little bit about the community in a bit around the
Sure.
game and how you build it. I am here playing live. I just wanted to mention that, as you can see, well, this is a retro-looking game, but there's a lot going on here in the combat. There's a lot of stuff going on that you will need to master to understand what's going on, and that's awesome because it's not just I mean, it's inspired heavily by those games from the past, but I can see that there's a lot of systems here that the player will have to master in order to be able to progress through the game. And yeah, I guess I will personally prefer the higher difficulty levels, but I also think that it's good that it's accessible to more people. Uh, Go ahead, Esteban. Or did you do the last question? I forgot. No, that was me about the replayability. So it's your turn. It's a turn-based interview.
Now that now that we are talking about replayability and roguelikes, and this is an interview for the Rogue Temple, what is your favorite roguelike and why?
I played quite a bit of Brogue back in the day. I liked Brogue. I thought it was like a good mix of both being accessible and also being like being a proper roguelike. I also like Case of Cud. I thought Case of Cud was a really like it is so I like how charming and a little bit surreal it is. Like the writing in the game appeals to me. So I played that quite a bit. I think that's the last sort of roguelike I played in any degree. I like the concept of roguelikes, but for many years now I have not really had time enough to engage with it. Like I so but I like high stakes games. I'm not a particular proficient gamer, but I get bored very quickly when the games don't really have any stakes to them. So I like difficult games more and more. Games like difficult strategy games, games where you kind of really have to sit down. So one of the like the really fun experience I had recently is after I watched obviously the Fallout TV series, I went back to Fallout 4, which is a game I didn't really click with me on release, but I learned that you could kind of play, or like I heard people say that the best way to play it is to play it in like the super difficult way, where it's like almost like a roguelike mode. You can only save and camp, and like it's very sort of not fully roguelike but much more difficult. And playing the game like that was like, that's how everyone should play the game. It's such a shame that there are people in a boardroom saying that no, we have to polish off all the edges and make it super accessible, because like it was so much more fun. I wish that experience was the experience I was presented just to begin with, so to speak. So yeah. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. I'm very fascinated by roguelikes. I really enjoy procedural generation techniques. I spent a lot of, like, before I started doing this full time, a lot of my hobby projects were procedural generation techniques for maps and stuff like that. I think that's super fun, super like I really enjoy coding those things. So wouldn't be surprised if there is some roguelike content in the future for SKALD.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's great that you mentioned Caps of Cod because that's like the cross between roguelikes and
Mhm.
RPGs, I guess, and because it has so much writing, and then it combines that with that all that crazy procedural generated stuff. So it's like a different kind of roguelike because you have the traditional dungeon hacks where you do very quick runs and you're just polishing your tactics mainly. Well, also your strategy, but it's
Mhm.
mostly about the mechanical thing, and that is why ASCII, I believe, one of the reasons why ASCII works well with those roguelikes is because you don't need after some runs the graphics get on the way.
Yeah,
um, yeah, you just need to push through.
yeah.
But then you have games like I guess Adam, Ancient Domains of Mystery, which
Mm.
started doing this crossover, and it also has this deeper character creation compared to other roguelikes. And yeah, okay, now let's talk about the community around this game. And we're a bit curious how did it came to be. I mean, did you have any, or do you have any? Did you have any challenges building that community about retro games? How did you manage to kind of put people together and get excited about this game?
I think the most important sort of thing about building the community for me is that I did a lot of thinking before I started making the game about the sort of like trying to identify what the niche for the like what is the market for the game, like what is the product I am, because I had like this idea that this game was kind of like there was a market for this type of game, and I wanted to play it myself like a game like SKALD, but it didn't really exist. So for me it became like ah why doesn't this exist? And I started examining it, and like it really turned out that there wasn't really a lot of games like this. So I kind of had this like hypothesis that this is an underserved market, and the more I explored, I found that it was actually. And so I kind of built the whole strategy for the game around that thinking. And the good part about that is that once you do that, it also becomes very easy to identify your community, because like you have a very strong feeling of like I know exactly what product, like what need I am trying to fill. So you can just then go out and kind of find the same people that want the same thing. It sounds very obvious, but it takes a little bit of like being a little bit clever. And so a lot of the core community, a lot of the basic community for SKALD came from, for instance, the Ultima community. There is a very large crossover. I had a lot of like the initial people who started following the game 5 years ago who are still in the community. They came from, for instance, the Ultima community, and some of them came from like the retro computing community because of the Commodore 64 inspiration in this game. Even though, yeah, so I was very kind of like meticulous and methodical about sort of finding those exact people that I think was going to that I thought was going to kind of like this kind of game, and then trying to kind of propose to those communities and bring them into the Discord for the game and stuff like that. So we also did crowdfunding. We did Kickstarter and Indiegogo, which was fantastically helpful in the beginning. It gave a lot of sort of seed funding for the game, and also it allowed, even more importantly almost than the funding, is the fact that it allowed us to basically very clearly identify people who were interested in this game. Like that was maybe the biggest takeaway, that we had like 700 people who were super enfranchised in the game, and you tend to kind of build a Discord and stuff like that. So yeah, that's how I went around building the community for this game. Probably other ways as well, but it worked well for me. Definitely.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think that's a big challenge because it's a niche, and then uh, you have a limited market size.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's always tricky to get new players interested and fetch into from some other markets into
yeah.
your game.
I think at least what's very important for a game like SKALD is that it takes a long time to build a community, because it's not the case that you can go on a single forum and then you get 500 people from that forum. It's like you get a handful here, a handful there. There's a lot of people out there, but it takes longer to kind of attract them. So I think if there is a big takeaway, the big takeaway is probably that you should start early to build your community. Have a clear concept for what you want to do, and then start early and just build a community around it. Like have a Twitter presence. Try to get something like a minimum viable product or a proof of concept. If you're able to get like a demo up there, that was also something I did very early. There's been demos of this game out for a long time in different sort of levels of polish and iterations, from very primitive ones to things that are very close to launch. And that's also been hugely helpful in kind of like building the community around it, because then people know so much more easily what you have to talk, what you're talking about, like what the thing you're trying to build is. And it's, yeah, so that's been both important and interesting, I think.
Cool. Stefan, your turn.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the quality of life features of SKALD, because while it looks retro and it plays retro in many regards, in others it doesn't. It has a lot of modern influences. I wanted to ask you, where did you get those influences? And secondly, how did you manage to find that balance of, okay, this is too much, this is going to hurt the old school feel, or no, this is needed?
Yeah, I think so. Basically, what I did is I've very kind of like done a lot of research by playing modern role playing games and kind of like doing it in very sort of a very critical sense. So I played a bit of played quite like I played a lot of the Pillars of Eternity games and the Pathfinder games and the Baldur's Gate games, and just constantly thinking, if I see features that I like there, thinking like, okay, how, like, can I really put this in the game? Because it's so easy to see something and think that like, no, that's probably not going to work in this game engine. But then you kind of come to a point where you have a lot of you know, eventually you get a lot of self-confidence in your ability to kind of make the game engine do what you want. And then you're thinking like, okay, well, maybe I should just, instead of thinking if I can, whether or not I can, I should just do it, because 9 out of 10 times it's just create a new branch on GitHub. Try. That's one of the things I do. I make a new branch on GitHub and I say, I give myself 24 hours. And if I can't do it in 24 hours, or if I can't like almost get there, then I don't do it. And I would say 9 out of 10 times I can do it. So whenever there is something where you're kind of trying like to lift the threshold and make things more, a lot of the time it's laziness kind of holding you back, or like being a little bit defensive and thinking, no, I don't want to put this in the game. But from like a designer perspective, I would say that almost always you should always do everything you can to kind of make things more accessible. Accessibility is not where we should be making the game hard. We can make the game hard through making it challenging and interesting, but we shouldn't make it hard because it's unenjoyable to play, so to speak. So so there are very few things that I actually haven't been willing to change in the game. Like if there is a solution to it, then it's something that will improve the user experience, I've always gone for it. I think the only thing that is like have been a kind of a classical thing is that there is a subset of players who find the font hard to read, but and we have certainly improved the font quite a bit, even between the demo and the final game. Like we've done a lot of improvements with the font, and I think we're at a level where like the number of people who bounce because of the font, who leave the game because of the font, is very low now. But it's also one of those things where I've kind of said that like I'm not going to do vectorized fonts in the game. The game uses a kind of like handmade pixel rendering engine that renders the pixels real, the way they used to be rendered 30 years ago. Like there is no Unity pixel shenanigans where it's like emulating pixels. This is actually like a a bitmap being drawn pixel by pixel by pixel, and there's no way to kind of like, or obviously we could probably do magic and have vectorized fonts as well, but I've said that no, that's not going to happen. Even though it would be better for some people, that's not the experience I'm building with this. So that's maybe the only thing where I've kind of like been a little bit hardcore. So anything that kind of ruins the visual expression of the game is something I've pushed hard back against. So yeah. But beyond that, I try to kind of like make every convenience for the player, and if it's not there, it's probably because I didn't have time to implement it, not because I don't think it would have been a good idea to do so.
Yeah, I think that's a hard call. For an Anaya's roguelike, which is a game that we made and released some years ago, we were very hardcore about it, and it's like a DOS game, so it's 640 by 320
Yeah.
pixels, and yeah, the UI, for instance, suffered a lot in that one because we wanted to like mimic what a real DOS game would look like and feel like. But I believe it's hard, and we have thought on doing like a asymmetric resolution, like to have a base resolution for the game and then the HUD on higher resolution.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of betrays some of the things that you want from
Yeah.
the beginning.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that ties with my next question. I wanted to ask you about the visual style, because I have also been working on a project. Well, it's been on standby for some years now, which is called Open Arturian X6, and it's basically an open source engine to create games similar to Ultima 6, kind of Ultima
Mm.
6.5. Um, why did you believe, or why did you bet on this visual style versus doing something more modern? Like, what were the main reasons why you thought this could work as a commercial project? What advantages did you see, like from the production side, or why did you stick with this kind of pixel art?
So the primary reason why I started thinking about it is that I literally wanted a pixelated game myself. I was missing it myself. Like there is value in the art style from a purely aesthetical perspective. But the thing that most people don't realize is that this art style is also extremely functional because it is very easy to mass produce. And now the game is I was fortunate enough to come into a position where we could have funding for artists in the game and have artists, for instance, like what you're seeing on screen right now. That pixel art is not my pixel art, and I'm very happy we have it. But before I knew that we would get funding from publishers and stuff like that, I had this idea that okay, if I have 16 colors and I have 16 by 16 tiles, then it's so simple that I can do it myself in the worst case scenario. That was kind of like the thing about it. And it also means that it's very quickly even when I did it myself, I could get a long way. I could make a very convincing sort of demo or like a vertical slice of the game using only my own programmer art. And then beyond that, I could also even after we got artists on, they are like, it's so fast for them to work. they can make like full assets in a couple of hours that can be like full complete assets. So that's also like really interesting. It means that we can have hundreds of art pieces, like the illustrations that you see in the game with the character illustrations and stuff like that. Like we can have hundreds of them instead of having like a handful because we couldn't afford them. Even if we could afford them, just like having people have time to make them, if they took a week or 2 weeks per asset, now we can have them make 2 every day. Like, you know, so there's actually a lot of like, I would say that if there is ASCII art and then like it's not ASCII art, but it has a lot of the same. It's interesting for a lot of the same reasons. It's kind of like trying to cut it down and say, how little do we need whilst still being able to express what we want to express? That's kind of the question. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree in a lot of that, and you know, I even have wondered if an ASCII commercial game would be possible nowadays, but it's very hard to get people over it, and that is
Yeah.
why, yeah, I think you had to make some compromise, but definitively helps a lot in the production, uh, but it's risky, because of
Yeah,
modern gamer expectations.
absolutely. But I
But
think like you can also turn it around and say that the most important thing with a game is to actually ship it. And I think that for a lot of games, there is like there is a thing where you try to make everything so perfect that it never ships. I've certainly been guilty of that, and so even though there is some risk that people will not accept the art style, there is an even larger risk that the game will actually you will like the financial risks of making, for instance, an ASCII game is quite low, hopefully,
mhm.
because you're not paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to have someone make art for you. You can just like literally do it using ASCII graphics. So I think honestly, I think like especially in the indie space, I think a lot more players developers should be a lot more willing to compromise and kind of like really think, yes, it would be nice to have, but do I need this? Do I need this really? Can I kind of scroll it back a little bit and see, okay, what can I do if I do it do a little bit simpler, a little bit simpler? Can I use like okay, maybe not ASCII graphics, what if I tweak it a little bit and then I do like monocolored 8x8 tile graphics instead? Could I tell an story using that? Like that's kind of like and take it from there, I think. So yeah, I think if you're a new developer, I think that's really really something because if the game never ships, it never ships, then it's and you will
Yeah, I
never.
think I think that you're describing like a part of what we went through with Emerald Woods, one of our projects, because for a long time we believed in ASCII, but then it became apparent that we were just blocking a lot of people of enjoying the game, and then
Yeah,
we started doing just what you mentioned, evolving into kind of monochromatic tiles, low resolution, and
yeah,
finally landed into something that is not quite this level. I love this pixel art; it's amazing. The animations are like simple but effective, and I love like the how to call it, like the proportions of the characters, like realistic, if you
yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So they're amazing. And I think, yeah, one of the other risks is that pixel art can be abused a lot, and
Yeah.
maybe people can dismiss the game as another indie game with pixel art, and
Yeah.
fail to see all the depth that you have invested in the writing and in the world and in the combat system,
Absolutely.
etc. But yeah, I think you gotta take some risk if you want to see the game out.
Definitely. And I think as a developer, I think you should be willing. I think one of the things that is important is to try and identify and develop a style that fits the game. Don't just pick a style because oh, I want it to look like a 16-bit Pokemon game. Like if that's what the game needs, then fine. But try to have a style that has personality. If you're an indie game, having something that has personality is the most important thing at all because so often I would say that consumers they truly they recognize the passion and the personality, but if things look generic, then you're in trouble. So I think there's a really good design from a game developer called Mark Rosewater. He's the head developer of the card game Magic the Gathering, and a fantastic quote from him is that if you make a product that everyone loves, everyone likes, but no one loves, then you're in trouble. So I think this is hugely important. That like if you make a game where everyone says that oh yeah looks nice that looks nice, then then you're in trouble. But if you have a game where like SKALD is a game where a lot of people say what is this looks like shit, but then there is a handful of people who says oh my god I will do anything to have this in my life, then that's where I want to live. And I think like if you're an indie game developer, that's where all indie game developers should try to live. So yeah.
Agree. I agree with that. Stefan, do you have
Last
any other
question from
question?
me because I
Okay.
have to run to a medical appointment. But so Scald is a game that is heavy on the reading, meaning it's heavy. It was heavy on the writing, and
Yeah.
writing for an RPG is not easy. So, how did you do it?
I honestly almost don't know, because that is maybe one of the things that I was not negatively surprised, but like I would have maybe done things a little bit different if I had started again with the game, because as you say, writing for RPGs is incredibly difficult. And one of the weaknesses of this project, one of the things that cost me a lot, is that I started writing in a style where the writing in the game is not stylized. It's, in a way, it's naturalistic. So that means that when people say something in the game, they are basically saying what that character would be naturally saying. It is not like the game writing is stylized. So like in a game like Ultima 5, for instance, where you have the parser-based writing, because you have so little space for the text, then all of the replies are stylized in a way that I find very charming. So it's almost like a haiku approach to writing in games. And like a lot of games, like for instance, a lot of the Zelda games do this as well. You know, like these JRPGs is very typical for a lot of them. Like Zelda games, like they have these like almost like one-liners, and that's often enough to convey the story. And I think that it's a trade-off, obviously. But I think that this game is what we call, like, it's a little bit too verbose. It uses too many words, which is fine, but it is very time consuming, and it means that it has limited the amount of content I could write. Fortunately, I think that like the feedback we're getting is that the writing is good throughout the entire game. Like, so happily it worked out for this game. But that's probably like where we took the biggest chance. If the writing hadn't been good, if like we were getting feedback that the writing is bad, then it would potentially have sunk the project, and then there would have been no way to fix it either, because there's so many words, it takes so long to make anything in the game, that like we would have had like a real issue. So I think like in a scenario where I don't get a new publisher who is willing to pay a lot of money to make a sequel, I think like there is definitely a scenario where the next game from me has even more low fidelity graphics and writing that is maybe a little bit less verbose, that is a little bit more like classical adventure games, where it's like these one-liners and not so flowery and word rich as it currently is. It was very fun to write it, especially now looking back at it, but it is extremely time consuming. So just like making an example, if you have like a dialogue tree where there is like a couple of responses, and then even just like a simple thing, you should be able to ask some questions, and then there should be some responses based on sort of how your worldview is, and then maybe there is a test in there somewhere. Suddenly, even a very simple tree has like 20 dialogue nodes, and then each dialogue node needs to be written out, and it's like half a page that you have to write for every node, like, and then suddenly it's 1,500 words, even just for a simple thing like talking to a barkeeper and buying ale from him and asking about a rumor, and like this really gets complicated really quickly. And so especially if you want to do branching, and that's branching dialogues, and the kind of like or dialogue where the people in the world are kind of like responding to the world state, becomes very quickly complicated. So yeah, but as I said, I don't regret doing it now, but I don't think I understood how big the risk I was taking was when I started writing for the game. That's a good way of putting it, I think.
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it paid out.
Yeah,
I'm going to forever remember that first rat encounter. It's
fantastic.
just tattooed on my mind.
There is yeah, I'm not going to spoil so much, but obviously there are high points and there are low points in the game. There are points where I wrote stuff where it's like, I just have to get this done. This is a transport leg of the journey. This is just like, I just need the exposition out there. But I would say that there is also parts of the game that I wrote that I feel like personally is like, this is probably the best writing I have ever done. So I think that if you really get into the game, unfortunately, it's not in the beginning of the game, it's in the middle part of the game. But if you get to some of those side quests in the middle of the game, I think that there is some writing there that at least I really enjoyed writing it. And I think the feedback we have been getting has been quite good as well. So yeah.
Great. Amazing. Yeah, thank you, Stefan, for that question and for all this. If you need to leave, please feel free. I
I
want
sadly
to.
have to say goodbye
All right.
because my health is not the best lately. But I will be watching just as everyone else when this is saved for future viewing.
Fantastic, and I hope you enjoy the game when it comes out. Feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have
Oh, I
questions.
will.
Or
I
yes,
will.
absolutely. Anytime. Send me a message on Twitter. I love interacting. So yeah.
I will.
Uh,
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye
I,
bye.
bye, Esteban.
Bye.
I have another question, and it kind of connects with what Esteban was mentioning, and it was the tools, because
Yeah.
Esteban works on this narrative design aspects of the game, and I am a coder, and he's always insisting of why don't we use this tool instead of that thing that you put together using some Excel or spreadsheets
Yeah.
and whatever. So yeah, what tools do you use? And I want to combine that with the evolution of the team. Like how did SKALD start, and how did the team grow with the time, and what tools did you start using? What
So
tools?
I think we can do the team first because it's almost the least interesting in a way. And so basically, I am at a core level, I am a solo developer. I'm the only one working in the company. But since we got funding from Raw Fury from the publisher, I was able to kind of outsource some of the art and music and sound effects. So they're not, even though they are not employees in the company, they are freelancers who have been delivering work, and some of them I've been working with for quite some time, and they are obviously fantastic at their job, and I'm so happy to be able to use them. Um, but all in all, I would say the team is very, very small. Yeah, and so that's the team, and then tools. It's the game is made like it uses Unity as a wrapper around my own engine, which is almost freestanding, you could say, inside Unity. So it almost doesn't use the Unity sort of library at all. It just like uses so it's like tens of thousands of lines of C++ code that could have probably been wrapped inside something and moved out of Unity to something else that could run C#. It just uses Unity to kind of basically interact with the graphics card in a sense. So it does all of the pixel art, all like the graphics. It kind of does in its own almost like pre-GPU way, where it uses just like CPU algorithms to draw the pixel art, and then it bakes the texture, sends it to Unity, and then Unity kind of sends it off to the graphic card. So it's like a very strange way of doing it, but the nice way about it is that it gives me such perfect control of all the pixels. And I really want that. I really wanted that for the game, and also because I thought it was fun and very sort of interesting to kind of have to rediscover all of these like drawing algorithms for drawing rasterized graphics. That's been like hugely fun for me to kind of have to like think of or learn like compression and optimization algorithms for working in these pixelated data structure, or like these data structures, which is something you would never need to interact with if you were kind of using Unity in the way that some people do that when they make pixel art games. So even though I use Unity, I say that I use my own engine because I use Unity so little. I'm very bad at Unity. I don't like interacting with it, so I do my own thing. And then the thing is that I very quickly understood that I needed like a pipeline for inputting like a content pipeline for the game, and I needed it separate from Unity. So both because I wanted it to and like the long and short of it was that I wanted to be able to create content without using Unity. I didn't want like so for instance, if I was onboarding you on the project, I didn't want you to have to use Unity and then use my own editor tools through Unity. I wanted it to be a standalone application. So I've made a standalone application, which is like it's called the SKALD data editor, the SKADE editor, which is looks a lot like if you've seen like the Neverwinter Nights tool set, or like the Morrowind, or like Oblivion tool set. Very sort of like Windows Forms application, super unsexy, but super powerful, because it literally is used to edit absolutely every aspect of the game. Like there is no aspect of the data in the game that you can't edit. It has a powerful like level editor, quite powerful dialogue builder. And one of the challenges with that is that, and that's also been like maybe one of the largest challenges with this project, is that when I start, it's not like I sat down and I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and then I spent a year to make perfect tools, and then I spent the rest of the time making the game. That's not how it worked. It was like I made the game, and then I could see that like, okay, the tools are holding me back, and then I had to improve the tools, and then okay, now I can make some more game, and then okay, oh no, the tools are holding me back again. So it's like constant. And so the problem is that the content you made down here, you can kind of tell that was made with worse tools than the new content. And I can really see that like now, even just like in the last months, when the tools have been like constantly perfected, now like I can make content that I feel is like, this is how now I'm at the point where I'm making the type of content that I wanted to make from day one, which is also, it's a little bit sad, a little bit like frustrating, but I think it's unavoidable. And I also think that you just have to think that, okay, I just hope I get a chance to make a second game, because now I've learned so much. I have so powerful tools. I have like all of these little, it's a learning experience. Because as long in addition to making the tools, what most people don't realize is that even if you make the tools yourself, you're still learning. You also have to learn how to use them. It's not like you make a tool and then you're also the best person at using that tool. It's actually quite challenging. Like, okay, what's the strengths of this? How can I use this tool in a way where, for instance, where the quest scripting doesn't become brittle and it will break very easily? How can I do it in a way that kind of uses like some safe programming practices to make sure that like, so there's, super interesting, super fun. It's been one of my favorite aspects of the project, and one of the things that I'm so happy I did it that way now, because it means that like I'm super psyched to start the next project once this is done, because like now I can make the game I really wanted to make.
Nice. Yeah, I think we often like kind of undervalue that task of building tools. And especially in solo projects, when you start solo, you say, why will I spend time building a tool? I will just define the data in JSON files or something like that, or data files, and or even in the source code, you hard code stuff there, and it just works. So yeah, but you would, as I understand, for you it paid off, right? Even if you were the only user of those tools, at least for now, I guess, it was a good investment of your time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where every time I have thought like, oh, should I just make a tool for this? Every time I've done that, I've always thought later like, oh, why didn't I do this sooner? This is the best investment I've ever done. So obviously it comes down to like, do you like programming tools, and are you good at it? Like, do you have the tool set to make tools, so to speak? Do you have what it takes? And if you enjoy it, then obviously it's fine. But if you hate it, then like, yeah, I understand why some people don't do it. But I think because we have engines like Unity and stuff like that, Godot and Unity, I think a lot less people are making tools. I think people are undervaluing how important it is to make tools. Even if you are using Unity, like the tools I have, I don't think there's any way I could have Unity do the same thing. Like, so even if I didn't use my own engine, even if I was using Unity more heavily, I still think like this tool set would probably make a lot of sense. And then there's also a thing where if you buy someone else's tools, at least I'm the kind of person where one of the things I hate the most in the world is to read documentation. Reading other people's documentation is something that makes me puke. So if I have two choices, and one is to write my own solution, even though it's a crappy homemade solution, and the other is to to read documentation and use someone else's solution. I will always make my own solution just because I hate reading other people's documentation. So we're all different, and for me, this is the only way I could have done it, I think.
Amazing. Anders, I was wondering if you had time for a couple more questions, or
Yes, please go, please go.
well, the first one is besides the fun aspect of the fun technical challenge of using Unity with your own custom engine, did you do it, or were you expecting to use it for additional advantages, like multi-platform, putting this on some other platforms in the future, mobile or
Yeah.
consoles?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the reasons why so many people say, oh, if you made your own engine, why don't you drop Unity completely? But there are a lot of good reasons to do it, because Unity has a lot of very good functionality, and obviously the cross-platform functionality is one of the, like, it's a really handsome feature. I'm not saying we will necessarily put this game on consoles, but we can. If there is a business case for it, we can. And that's just the fact that you don't have to kind of like even think about, okay, this, if I do it in my own engine, how will I even start thinking about it? I can just like push a button in Unity and it builds it to a Mac or to whatever. So that's super, super nice. And also things like, for instance, the debugger feature in Unity is also spectacular. Like, it is really, 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 it will just, if you use it properly and you use like the deep profiler for debugging, the profiler feature, where you can literally go in and see like every process that is running on, like, either in memory or on your CPU, and like just like trace it back to the source. It is so helpful. Like, it will literally tell you, okay, this exact function is pulling a lot of generating a lot of junk in memory, or is pulling a lot of CPU cycles, and like, it is so helpful. So I don't want to sound like I'm like, I am very happy to be using, like, I think this is the best of both worlds for me. Yeah, so very happy to be using Unity. I have no plans of leaving Unity as long as I can continue doing it in my own strange little way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And one final question, maybe it has been asked before, but and I'm gonna show you this, are there any plans for a boxed edition of SKALD?
Yeah, we
Have
are
you
looking
considered
at it.
that?
We are looking at it because it is part of the Kickstarter crowdfunding fulfillment. It's actually a boxed edition. Unfortunately, we have been very delayed with it, and it's because making physical product and shipping it is very time consuming, and it's something that I've not been able to. I've just had to tell the community that it has to wait until post launch. So we will definitely be looking into it, and if we produce boxes. For if we find a good way to produce it in larger quantities, we will obviously be doing a limited edition run for it, because I think it's such a fantastic thing. I really, really love big box editions, and all of the, like, the feelies, maps, cloth map. Yeah, so it's my big dream, and yeah, so I will make everything. I will
What
make everything possible.
what will be the contents of that box if you could do what you wanted?
So I think it would be like the things that we have kind of proposed in the crowdfunding, which I still think is a really good idea, is obviously a map, either a paper or a cloth map, depending on the edition. And it would probably also contain a game manual. That would be so fun to make. And so the idea for the game manual has always been to kind of produce it in the form of a tabletop RPG supplement, so that you could almost use it to play like a tabletop version of the game, but it also contains all of the rules and stuff for playing the game on the computer. That's like my sort of high level design concept for it. And then it would be some feelies. I really want to include like custom tabletop RPG dice, for instance, in the box set. I think that's such a cool little. It's a little thing, but it's also very much like it's an object of use. You can actually use it to play the game. That would be spectacular. So
Is nice. Is there any trinket? Like in Ultima, you had the Ankh and the
yeah,
Moonstone. Which one
yeah.
would you include?
I don't know exactly. I think it would just be the dice for this one, to be
Okay.
honest. I don't think it's one of those things where I've been thinking about it for a long time. Like, what would be the trinket for this game? But I'm also a guy where I'm very sort of detail oriented. I don't want to do something just to do it. It needs to make sense. Like it needs to comment on the setting or on the like. It can't just be just a random thing I throw in there and say, this is the glass bead of scaldiness. Like
Yeah.
that's. I want to avoid that. That's not what I want to do.
All right.
Hello,
Rocky. All
hello,
right.
Rocky.
Anders, okay, I think thank you very much for this interview. I think it was very fun. We are looking forward for SKALD here
You.
and wishing you for a very successful release
Thank
in
you.
3 days, May 13th.
Yeah.
Everybody,
30th, not 13th. 30th.
30th, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody go ahead and wishlist SKALD on Steam. And yeah, thank you so much for this interview. And any final thoughts?
No, thank you so much for having me on. It's been really fun to discuss the things we are obviously both passionate about.
Amazing. So thank you, Anders, and I will see you soon.
Yeah, you too. Okay.
Have a great day.
Bye bye.
Bye.